Now, these allegations that are coming out against Lizzo, something I wasn't expecting. Gotta talk about this one. Now, Lizzo, a 35-year-old rapper, singer, songwriter out of Detroit, Michigan. She's a very big, no pun intended, artist in the mainstream world of music who's very loved by her fans. Lizzo's one of those artists who has a different kind of fan base, mainly because she's became this figure in the mainstream who's always been considered very inclusive, if you will. She's a face for what they call the body positivity movement. She's an LGBTQ ally as well, and overall, just like I said, she's very inclusive. Her fan base reflects that openness, and so far, it's been working out for her. Now that's until this lawsuit right here. Shall we talk about it? Well, let's talk about it. So like we always do over here, let's get an overview of what exactly is going on. So yesterday, it was reported that 35-year-old Lizzo is facing a lawsuit that was filed by 3 of her tour dancers who claimed that they were subjected to sexual harassment and hostile work environment. On top of that, they recalled one specific situation where they were pressured to touch nude dancers during a live show, and Lizzo is the one who apparently pressure them to do this. So the complaint that was filed Tuesday in Los Angeles court was filed by Ariana Davis, Crystal Williams, and Noel Rodriguez. These 3 women are coming out with a bunch of allegations against Lizzo. On top of harassment, hostile work environment accusations, we also have racial and religious discrimination. Now, the racial discrimination part is kind of interesting because they're saying that Lizzo, a black woman, was discriminating against her own kind, i.e., other black women. On top of allegations against Lizzo herself, a woman by the name of Charlene Quigley is also brought up in this lawsuit. Charlene was apparently the captain of Lizzo's dance team. So let's go over one of these allegations, and this encounter apparently went down in Amsterdam, one of my favorite cities in the world. I've been there like 5 times. Love it. Out here in Amsterdam. Yes, sir. So this encounter allegedly went down in the red light district. Lizzo, her entourage, and these 3 dancers apparently attended a sex show in the red light district, and they were allegedly pressured to engage with the performers. How exactly were they pressured to engage with them? Well, let's check out this excerpt from the lawsuit. Lizzo began inviting cast members to take turns touching the nude performers, catching dildos launched from the performers' vaginas, and eating bananas protruding from the performers' vaginas? Wait a second, did I just read that? Eating bananas protruding from the performers' vaginas? Tell me Lizzo pressured these women to do that? That's been just crazy. Eating bananas protruding from the performers is insane. So what happened after this is one of the dancers in this lawsuit stated that Lizzo turned all of her attention towards her and began pressuring her to touch one of the nude performers' breasts. Lizzo then turned her attention to Ms. Davis and began pressuring Ms. Davis to touch the breasts of one of the nude women performing at the club, the lawsuit claims. Now, the pressuring apparently didn't stop there because they're claiming that Lizzo led a chant driving the same dancer to touch the nude performer. So essentially, she started with pressuring her, and then after that, when she didn't do it, she literally led a chant. So I guess something like, touch the titty, touch the titty. Apparently, Ariana Davis ended up caving, and she did it. Not because she wanted to, but allegedly due to the pressure that was being applied from Lizzo. It's also being alleged that the captain of the dance team was apparently forcing her religious beliefs on the women. Aside from that, she apparently made them uncomfortable by making comments about their sexuality, and on top of that, gave fellatio to a banana in front of them. Now, this next part of the lawsuit is interesting because they were saying that Lizzo was not outright making remarks about their weight, but apparently called attention to their weight after a performance at South by Southwest. Their lawyer said the following about this: the stunning nature of how Lizzo and her management team treated their performers seems to go against everything Lizzo stands for publicly, while privately she weight shames her dancers ways that are not only illegal but absolutely demoralizing, the lawyer said. So this part right here is of course very notable because, like we stated at the beginning and like all of us know, Lizzo is the face of the body positivity movement. What that precisely is, by the way, essentially it's a movement which its intended goal is to challenge the societal standards of appearance. It's intended to promote acceptance of all body shapes, sizes, despite the difference in gender or skin tone in said bodies. The main focal point of the body positivity movement, however, is specifically the acceptance of people with a higher body weight. Now, the body positivity movement itself is a trend. It's a new thing that just arose around a decade ago, but the ideology of the movement has been around since the 1960s and directly derives from the fat acceptance movement. The first time the movement went public was in 1967 when a radio personality by the name of Steve Post held a quote-unquote Fat In protest in Central Park, New York. The Fat In protest garnered over 500 people who came together in Central Park, New York to protest bias against fat people. So that's where the body positivity movement derives from, and the movement has a really positive intention, but I think with how things are these days, especially with this generation, they take everything too far, and it goes from promote loving your body to outright promote an unhealthy lifestyle. I'm an advocate for people loving their bodies, yes. By the same token, however, being overweight is unhealthy and should not be celebrated. Two things can be true at once, and we should always strive to stay grounded in this thing called reality. So Lizzo has been the poster girl for the big girls, if you will. She was even on the Vogue cover some time back. So to hear this, when your whole brand is based on being this person who on top of that gets elevated by the industry because of it, yet you're allegedly out here acting like this, to me that's insane. Now, as for Lizzo weight shaming, I guess, these women right here, these dancers, aside from that being a call that's coming from inside the house, yeah, what I mean? I don't know exactly what this might have looked like, by the way. I'll say this about that, and yes, they're gonna call me fatphobic after this, but I'm fine with that. It's hard to imagine Lizzo, of all people, saying things about someone else's weight. Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. And part of me is like, ain't no way Lizzo was on that. But then again, is it really too far-fetched? And I'll talk about this point later, but just because Lizzo is overweight herself doesn't mean that she can't possibly be one of those people who would weight shame another person, let alone a woman. What the lawsuit specifically stated is that she needed to apparently explain her weight gain and disclose intimate personal details about her life in order to keep her job. Now, as for the racial discrimination part, it's being alleged by the dancers that all the melanated, i.e. black dancers of the team were apparently getting treated differently than those who weren't black. They're saying that they got accused of being lazy, unprofessional, and having bad attitudes, and none of this criticism was being pointed towards the other non-melanated dancers. Now, as for this allegation right here, I wonder how this actually looked like. If they were showing up on a job being unprofessional, being lazy, and having a bad attitude, then personally, I don't know what you think, but personally, I think they should be able to get called out for it. I'm not assuming that they showed up in this manner. I'm just saying if they did, then of course this was justified, right? Just for the mere fact that if you're getting paid to show up to a job, you being professional, you not being lazy by taking any shortcuts, and you showing up with an attitude of gratitude, all that right there, that's to be expected. And in this case, let's say that it was justified. Does that automatically have to be because they were melanated? Not necessarily. On the other hand, if the other non-melanated dancers were showing up the same way as the black dancers, i.e. unprofessional, having bad attitudes, and being lazy, then obviously they should have faced the same criticism and scrutiny as the black dancers. On another encounter with Lizzo, the dancers were claiming that they were subjected to, in quotation marks, an excruciating re-audition back in April after they repeatedly got accused of drinking alcohol before they were supposed to go on stage to work. It was being alleged that the work environment was really bad. They apparently didn't get any bathroom breaks for hours and feared asking for a break because they didn't want to get fired. On this other encounter and allegation, one of the dancers who apparently privately recorded performance notes, I'm guessing it was during a rehearsal maybe, but she ended up getting fired the following month after Lizzo found out that she did this. What happened after this is one of the other dancers allegedly approached Lizzo about this encounter and told her that she would now resign. Lizzo after this apparently aggressively approached her with balled fists, obviously meaning, bitch, I'm about to beat your ass type of vibe, right? The dancer stated that she feared Lizzo would have acted out on her threats by hitting her had the other dancers not been in the vicinity. So that's essentially what this entire lawsuit is about. Lizzo's being accused of essentially being the complete opposite of what the public know her as. From this description that they're making of her, she doesn't sound like a pleasant person at all, and that is a little bit shocking because I wasn't expecting that, you know, especially when it comes to Lizzo. I don't know too much about Lizzo, but just from the little I know, I didn't think this kind of description would ever be attached to her. Now, as for what I think about this entire situation, well, first of all, I'll be completely honest with you. After everything I've read so far, I don't think this entire thing warrants a lawsuit. Let me explain further. Hypothetically speaking, let's say that every single thing on this lawsuit is true. That to me just paints the picture of a version of Lizzo that depicts someone who's an asshole, who's very mean and not a good person behind the scenes and definitely deserves to get exposed. Not because they're successful and we're holding a grudge against a person for what they have and we're preying on their downfall, not at all, right? But because said person is pretending to be this loving human and is fooling millions of people, a lot of those being young kids, that they are what they say they are. If you ask me, unauthentic behavior to this extent, especially when a person in question has a lot of influence, should get exposed 100%. But with that being said, I don't think being a bad person to this extent warrants a lawsuit. I mean, for example, they're allegedly out at this sex show in Amsterdam. Lizzo, I guess, allegedly pressured them to touch the nude woman performing. They could have, of course, not done it, but they did acquiesce because she stayed on their neck about it. I understand that there's a power dynamic that comes into play, because if someone of Lizzo's stature that you're working for tells you to do something, most people in their shoes are gonna comply because of that dynamic. Also, let's not forget that not only is she Lizzo and, she's a superstar and she's mainstream and she's famous and successful, but she's also their boss. So that's another aspect of this. I mean, this is not an office job we're talking about. When these girls were out in Europe, Amsterdam with Lizzo, and they're out smiling and laughing together, they could be at the bar or they could be at the sex show and Lizzo is still their boss. They might have been traveling all around the world together, but at the end of the day, they're still working wherever they go. So wherever they go, no matter the environment, they're still at the end of the day working. And when you're out on a job with your boss and they tell you to do something, you're most likely going to comply, right? Especially if they're out here insisting and, leading a chant like, touch that titty, touch that titty. Now this right here, to me at least, sounds like someone who doesn't know what boundaries are. When someone doesn't want to do something like touch naked women, even if it's at a sex show, you just let it be without insisting that they do it. Why does she allegedly have to pressure these women into doing that? That's really weird and inappropriate, right? I don't know about you, but to me, that's a description of someone who's very controlling and very manipulative, because people who are manipulative and controlling have a very hard time when people actually tell them no. And it's just something that's kind of like an overload to their system. They can't take it because they're not used to it, especially if people usually acquiesce to their demands. And as far as that description, that story right there, that's kind of the picture that it paints in my head, at least. With that being my stance, I don't think that makes Lizzo a criminal. I just think it makes her a DICK head. There's no mention of Lizzo outright forcing herself on these dancers in any kind of way or, doing anything to cause harm to them. But there is mentions of Lizzo, number one, not respecting other people's boundaries, and number two, just being an asshole, right? Also, the alleged racial discrimination stuff on top of that. And for that, she's obviously whack, if it's true. So that's kind of what I think about that. I'm not sure what you think. Like I stated, I just think she sounds very unpleasant, mean, and just controlling, manipulative. Not a good boss at all, but I don't think she's a criminal, right? On the other hand, there is the emotional distress part that comes into play. A lot of lawsuits get filed because someone suffered emotional trauma and emotional distress due to the actions of another person. If everything happened the way they claim it happened, then obviously it must have caused some kind of emotional distress to them that could have had a negative effect on their life after those events. For them to actually win a case like this in the court of law, by the way, they're going to need extensive, and I mean extensive, documentation of everything that transpired. So let's say they don't have extensive documentation. Well, in that case, it's very unlikely that they're actually going to win. However, maybe for these three women right here, for them, it could actually not be about winning, but it could more so be about retaliating against Lizzo by exposing to the public who she allegedly is behind the scenes. Because with them filing this lawsuit, now we're all talking about it. So mission accomplished for them. Now, I'm not sure if you read the headlines about this, but the headlines are going crazy right now. All the mainstream outlets that are reporting on this, they're going crazy. Now, the reason why this thing is hitting so hard in the headlines, let me explain it. It's because of Lizzo's image. She doesn't sound like the kind of person who would act in this way. No way, Lizzo's this kind of person behind the scenes. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. She's so loving and she's so inclusive. That's the perspective from the mainstream and her own fan base. Now, why exactly is that the case is the golden question. Well, factor in her cookie cutter, politically correct, all-inclusive brand and compare that to the person that's being described in this lawsuit. Now, right there, we have a huge contrast, which that creates the perception of a devil. I mean, to be fair, considering how they're describing her, she does sound pretty damn toxic. And then as far as the part about the overweight thing, again, the pot calling the kettle black, and I'm sure I'll get called fat phobic or something, but I don't give a fuck. As for this part, I'm not even going to say that this can't be true because Lizzo, doesn't carry a minuscule body, figure, anatomy herself. And I say that to say, just because someone is something themselves doesn't mean that they can be against what they are. You get what I'm saying? There's black people who despise their own kind. There's white people who don't like white people. There's Asian people who don't like Asian people. People of a certain religion sometimes don't like other people of the same religion. You get what I'm saying? So just because you yourself are something or subscribe to the same ideology as another person, that doesn't automatically guarantee that you'll love another person who believes in the same thing that you believe in or are the same thing that you are. And that even applies to something that's as superficial as skin color. By the way, this all stems from self-hate and self-denial. It's not normal to feel intense hate towards people just in general. It's very unhealthy. That signifies that you probably need to look internally and focus on yourself and fix all that stuff that's not working inside of yourself first before you judge people and hate other people. But it's especially not normal if you don't like someone who reflects what you are. Because in that case, not only do you have hate for the outside world, but you also got hate for something that you are yourself. So denial of self, self-hate, that's what it is. And it's actually more common than you think. I digress. Considering the fact that Lizzo is Lizzo, that doesn't make it impossible for her to be fatphobic. Now, if that part, everything they said about her making allegedly, comments about their weight, if that part is true, that would be Lizzo projecting her own insecurities onto these women. Because not everybody of a higher body weight is uncomfortable with how they look. On top of that, most people, no matter how they feel about themselves, don't actually try to project those insecurities onto other people. Because most people aren't evil and mean-spirited. This allegation is probably the most detrimental of them all. Because when your image is built on body positivity and you allegedly indulge in a little bit of body negativity behind the scenes, the mainstream and the fan base you've accumulated are all going to have something to say about it, and it won't be good things. Even though personally I'm going to be hesitant to believe every single thing that they're saying in this lawsuit. First of all, number one, I will keep an open mind, and I'll also say this: I'm always suspicious and apprehensive of anyone who builds a brand that's based on loving everybody, because that's not real. Ain't no way you love everybody. Ain't no way. I don't believe that BS. Do you believe that BS? You shouldn't believe that BS. Ain't no way you accept everybody and you love everybody. That right there, that's a marketing ploy. And it's a strategy that's employed by public figures so they can recruit and amass as many people as possible as fans. I mean, just look at Ellen DeGeneres, who fooled an entire population into thinking that she was this amazing person.
Now you're playing electric guitar, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What else do you want to learn?
你现在在学怎么弹电子吉他，你还想再学什么？
Just one question. Just what else does he want? I don't know what you're telling him, but just ask him what I'm saying.
Okay, sorry. 你现在还想学什么？现在
See, that was that short.
Everybody, look at me. I'm donating cars and materialistic things to people on TV so I can fool y'all into thinking I'm a good person. The whole time she was this mean-spirited human who was able to portray a fake loving persona in front of a camera for how long? I mean, she's a damn good actor. It's a really good strategy, by the way, because believe it or not, most people can't see through it. If you're listening to me talk, obviously you can, because you're different. Over here we're different. We can see through the BS, right? I mean, just ask yourself this: why do you think Lizzo is as successful as she is? Obviously she's very talented and makes the type of music that has a wide appeal and gets played in malls and all that, right? But another side is her brand is of course very congruent with that as well. When those two come together in a concoction, you're the perfect candidate for getting marketed to the mainstream and the masses. That's why industry plans, I'm thinking about a specific someone right now, I ain't gonna say the name. That's why the industry always tries to market industry plans as very relatable and very likable. It's always a marketing ploy that's being employed to make money. What they specifically try to do to market them as very relatable and likable is this one thing. Check out for this one thing. Anything they do publicly where you're going to get an insight into their personality and who they actually are, like let's say an interview or they release a piece of content, all that stuff is not only orchestrated, but it's carefully scrutinized before it's released to the public. I love everybody and everybody's amazing and the world is an amazing place and humanity is beautiful, and I'm not saying anything original to go against the grain so I can keep on being marketed as this person who's relatable and amazing. Because there's quotas that have to be filled, and the marketing department is telling me to say these things so I don't piss off the masses, so I can keep on making money off the masses. It's never, okay, and I mean never, an authentic conversation, because you'll never get authentic answers out of someone who's being marketed as something that they are not, which is they're being marketed as someone who's real and someone who's very easy to like. Now that you know that, it's going to be very easy for you to spot some things in the future. See, this is why I don't think I ever have a shot at becoming globally famous. I mean, you won't catch me on camera talking about I love everybody. No. I hate all you motherfuckers. Y'all suck. As for the racial discrimination part, that's of course very interesting because Lizzo is a black woman. If she's allegedly out here discriminating against black women, that's what you are yourself, Lizzo, a black woman. So what the hell? Now, these are some pretty hefty allegations right here. They did say that they got accused of being lazy, unprofessional, having bad attitudes. Now, if that's an accurate description of how they were showing up on the job, like I stated earlier, I think they should get called out for it and they shouldn't be able to use the race card. I'm sure we can agree on that. If they were showing up like that on the job, then of course they should get called out for being unprofessional, right? But we don't have too much information on what this precisely was looking like though, so let's refrain from speaking on that further. Now, that aside, all in all, I will say this: Lizzo's brand will take a hit after this one. I mean, these dancers are coming out and essentially poking holes in everything her brand stands for, and everything here gets magnified by the fact that we're talking about 3 young women saying all these things, and they actually worked closely with Lizzo. And usually when we hear these types of stories, it's women coming out against men, right? But here we have a case of other women coming out against another woman. 3 different women coming out against one woman. They're coming together and they're saying that this woman is this way and she's not a good person. And these 3 women, they all have one thing in common, which is they were all closely working with Lizzo for a period of time. And for that reason, I will for sure keep an open mind here. Just like how we would keep an open mind if, let's say, a woman came out and spoke out against a man who allegedly did something to her. I think in a case like this where there's 3 different women and they're coming together and they're all stating that they've had the same exact experience with this one person, which is Lizzo, I don't see why we shouldn't take these allegations seriously. I'm not the court of law, so I'm not gonna say whether or not she's guilty or not. I'm just saying, personally for me, I will definitely keep an open mind here, and I'm not automatically gonna subscribe to the narrative that they might be lying or that they're just doing this to try to get some money, because I wouldn't do that to a woman coming out against a man. So why would I do that to a woman coming out against, or 3 women coming out against one woman? You get what I'm saying? Man or woman, we just got to make sure that we keep it consistent on all fronts here. So it is undoubtedly going to hit her hard and is already hitting her very hard. Anyway, if you made it to the end, I would appreciate a like before you leave. Thank you. I mean, you forgot, but it's okay. Oh, you changed your mind. Thank you. Any thoughts on this Lizzo lawsuit? It's being alleged that Lizzo, of all people, was out here weight shaming the people who were working for her. Crazy. She allegedly engaged in a little bit of racial discrimination of her own kind and allegedly subjected 3 young women who worked for her to a hostile work environment. And then we have the sexual harassment allegations. You've heard what I have to say. I'm sure you may have a thing or two to say about it. So you let me know. Catch you on the next one, and I am out.